This is an initiative led by Roosevelt Theatre. It's funded by Balansepotten, and it's called Avslappet Norge, or Relax Norway. And it's an initiative we've started at the theatre to support ourselves and support the field in Norway and further afield to get more ambitious and more involved in accessibility measures. And the way we thought we could do that is by creating conditions where we ourselves could start to learn more, and we could do that with our colleagues. One of the main things of that project is online conversations, what we're calling relaxed conversations. And the first one is with Iva and Nene, and then there will be more coming through the year that we will announce later. A couple of other things to say. For those that are willing to, it's really nice if you can turn on your camera. I think it makes for a nice meeting energy, but if you can't, then don't. Also, in terms of questions, it's really good if you can store up your questions, and then there will be opportunities. There will be opportunities throughout to ask, but you'll be invited at different points. You'll be to open up the conversation. Yeah, I just want to say I'm really looking forward and excited, and hand the word over to Iva and Nene.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex. And thanks, everybody. And thanks, everyone, for being here. Yeah, it's we've just been trying to work out the technical problems and get sorted with where we're at. So, and Nene and I are in different places. I'm currently in Glasgow. And where are you, Nene?
I'm currently in London. Hi, everyone. Lovely to see you all. Yeah, like Iva said, we're kind of doing a little bit of like first time we've done this together alongside each other. And there might be moments where maybe you can hear a scratchy noise right now, and I apologize. And maybe it cuts out at points. And also, I'll be trying to attempt to share some slides. So we'll see how we get along with that. But there might be a bit of back and forth between me and Iva. But I'm ready to start when you're ready to start, Iva.
Let's do it.
I'm going to share my screen then.
Is it me first?
I can go first. I can go first. Hi, everyone.
Okay.
Hi. I actually can't see myself. All I can see now is Iva, which is perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Nene. I use the pronouns they, them, and I work at Arts Admin as an assistant producer. And Arts Admin is the organization that looks after and produces the making of Pinocchio. Arts Admin is a producing organization. We look after many different artist projects and programs, some that are led and conceived by us, and some that are led and conceived by artists. We talk about our programs and our projects sitting in between the social and climate justice. I myself am an artist and a producer, and yeah, I guess I love the arts. I see it as a beautiful, vital place where you can change the world, yourself, and others around you, hopefully. Um, yeah, and I'll give an image description of who I am. So I'm a brown person with a bald head, wearing glasses, and a top. Behind me is a blue background, a white background with like a brown shelf. And I'll pass to Ivor to introduce himself.
Thanks, Nene. Yeah, hi, I'm Ivor McCaskill. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns in English. I'm a theatre maker and a live artist based in Glasgow, in the UK, and I create and perform work both for children and for adults. I'm transgender, I'm queer, I'm autistic, I'm an ADHDer, all the great things. I'll do a little visual description. I'm an average height trans man with a gentle smiley face, and I've got little glasses on today. My hair is quite short. It's reddish brown with a lot of white hairs, but it's under a cap today. And I have a short beard, and I'm wearing a soft pink sweatshirt. I talk a lot with my hands. I'm not doing any sign language interpretation. Um, I just talk a lot with my hands, and I will probably hold a few different objects which helped me to focus. So at the moment, I've got this thing that does, it's like a blue and white and green spiral thing that's quite good. And I've got a soft toy sushi as well, which is helping me to focus. Anyway, that's me.
Okay, before we kind of start, I'm going to give a little bit around some of the terminology that me and I will be using. So when we talk about disability, we're going to be talking about in the framework or the understanding of the social model of disability. So that is a framework that asks us to kind of shift our traditional ableist attitudes towards disabled people, disabled folks being the problem, to actually seeing the world and the environment around us as the barrier that excludes disabled people or us from the world. So barriers can be many different things. So barriers can be physical, environmental things around us. So they can be steps, loud noises, long texts, but also they can be our own learnings and our own cultural, societal beliefs as well. I'm also going to be talking about embedded access and access. And when we talk about access, and embedding access, we're going to be mostly referencing this definition, which is one from an organization called Shape Arts, which are a disability-led organization in the UK that offer sector support for disabled artists. So they describe embedding access as a more proactive and pre-planned form of access provision, which considers the audience experience right from the concert stage or the outset of the planning. So this is kind of thinking about access as core in the creative process, as a creative tool that sits alongside curation and collaboration and working alongside each other. So these are kind of some of the ideas that will be floating about, and hopefully that terminology is useful for you all. Yeah, I'm going to stop speaking and hand back to Ivor.
Thanks. Yeah, great. Yeah, it's good to think about the embedding access, and I think with this process of the making of Pinocchio, it's been a mixture of having ideas of access from the start, and then as we're moving along, more access kind of has been built in. But I'll give a little introduction to the making of Pinocchio, which is the piece that Nene and I work on together, and which will be coming to Rosendahl Theatre like next week. What? So we're very excited to bring it to you. So I'm one half of Cade and McCaskill with my partner Rosanna Cade, and with our creative team, which involves designers and lighting people and sound and production. I'm one of the creators of the Making of Pinocchio. So the Making of Pinocchio is a live performance that is touring internationally, and every show is what we call a relaxed performance. And obviously there are lots of different ways of thinking about what relaxed performances might be, but the basic idea is that it's an experience that relaxes the usual rules of how to be in a theatre. And I think some people feel that this just means you should turn the music down and turn the lights up, and that's it. But we're interested in trying to question those theatre rules and find ways to make the experience as welcoming as possible, by understanding the different potential needs of our audiences and the barriers that they might be facing. So the Making of Pinocchio is a semi-autobiographical performance that my partner Rosanna and I made in response to my gender transition. So in 2018, I came out as trans, and I realized that I wanted to make changes to my identity and to my body. And we knew that those changes would affect our relationship and our lives as lovers and collaborators. So we started this creative process as a way of understanding our experience better, and then and then we wanted to share this with audiences as well. So in the show, we weave together our life experience with the story of Pinocchio, the little lying puppet who wants to be a real boy. So when we were working on the piece, we were always imagining it as a live performance. But because we were working during COVID times, the first version of the piece had to be digital and had to be on screen. It was shown as part of Take Me Somewhere Festival in May 2021. Then we had another year to work it back into being a live show, and had the live premiere in Hamburg at Kampnagel. And then we had the UK premiere at Battersea Arts Centre as part of London International Festival of Theatre. And I think initially in those stages, as we worked very slowly on the piece. So as we were slowly working on the piece, our thoughts around disability access were really mixed in with how can we communicate these ideas really clearly, and also in different languages. How can we make everybody feel welcome? But also we were a bit concerned about how to avoid any transphobic attacks, because we knew that the subject matter could also make us vulnerable to sort of protests and things like that. So everything, as we were making this work, we were really thinking, how are people going to experience this, and what do they need to know, and what barriers might there be? So what might make it feel difficult for audiences to feel comfortable? What do people feel comfortable and supported coming to the venues that we're going to? Whether they're concerned about the disability access, or whether they're concerned about whether the space might be supportive to trans and queer people. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about some of the, the measures that we put in place, and a lot of them are well known to people making accessible work, but we'll talk through it. So when we were making this digital version, the piece was filmed with 4 cameras, and it was filmed basically in one take. So it was all live edited, and then filmed, and then the next day it was screened online. So during that pandemic time, when none of us could actually go to the theatre, we were really aware and interested in how to create something digitally that might have the intimacy of a live performance. And it really made us much more aware of how difficult it might be for lots of people to access the theatre. You know, I think we all remember those times of like suddenly opportunities for people who would never be able to physically get to the theatre were made for everyone to share kind of artwork. And in line with the values of the festival, Take Me Somewhere, we knew we wanted to have closed captions on the film, and we also wanted to work with an audio describer to create an audio version to go alongside the performance. So for the captions, we worked with a company called Collective Text. And Collective Text, they do live captioning for performances, but also they caption films. What was a bit difficult and not best practice was that we needed the captions to be ready within 24 hours. So we filmed the show on a Wednesday night, and then the next night it was being shown. So there was quite a fast turnaround with that, with those captions. But we managed to do it. And some of the tricky parts of it were like trying to think about how to describe the sounds. So there's parts of the piece that are basically mimed with music and sound effects. So trying to come up with little words to describe those sounds is a bit difficult. And we worked with somebody who works on creative captions. And so he was able to, Daniel Hughes, he was able to create the captions and place them on different parts of the screen, because we wanted to try and keep the text connected to whoever was speaking, rather than always just have it right at the bottom. We also worked with Jamie Ray, who's a deaf theatre maker. So he worked with us as a consultant to just check that he could understand what was going on and that it made sense. There's a kind of sidebar, but in the same world. Jamie was really interested to think about how we could actually have a British Sign Language interpreter within the piece, because obviously for a lot of deaf people, English is not their first language, or it might be quite hard for them to read text all the way through a show. So we did think very carefully about how we could have a BSL interpreter, and it became very difficult for us to imagine, because the space that we perform in is so wide. It would take a lot of pre-work to try and have a BSL interpreter who could like be close to the action. So unfortunately, we made the choice on this one that we would work with captioning instead of BSL. But actually, in our next piece, we're trying to embed the idea of BSL much earlier on. So we're going to be working with a consultant. In a new piece that we're making, we're playing with different speeds. So we're interested to see if you can have BSL that can go slow and then go fast, and how you would do that. Anyway, I'm going to show you some images of the captions, because when we went into the live performance, we were able to make the captions a bit more interesting and animated. So I'm going to try and show you some images. Nene, would you be able to share those images? Maybe you're doing it already. Okay, so yeah, that first one is from the live version. So if you go back to the first image, Nene, and you can see how in the digital version we have this split screen, and we're sort of talking to each other between the screens, and we put the text as close to the speaker as possible. We also used different fonts, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So the positioning became quite important. So then when we moved to the live version, if we see the next image, it's the same discussion, but so on that one, Rosanna was saying, "You make work for children," and on this one, we're talking to each other through the screen in the show, but Rosanna's lines are as close to them as possible as we're speaking. So you can see that this is how the live show is, and we have this big screen right in the middle of the stage. So you're always watching what's being filmed on the screen, and then you're seeing how that's being made behind it. So obviously that makes it quite easy to have captions integrated into the show, because we've got somewhere that we want people to be looking all the time. So in other performances, it can be harder to find out where you could put those captions, but this really worked for us. If we can see the next image, Nene. Don't know how big it is on your screen. It might be hard to tell, but what we also tried to do is change the font to represent different characters, and to try and give a sense of how the lines might be delivered. If you go to the next image, thanks. So here it's very subtle. This is in the digital version, but the voice of the blue fairy has this kind of little glowing effect on it, which just gives a small indication of the kind of sense that this character's got like a magical voice. It's just a small thing. And the next image. Yeah, and this is the cricket, who is the narrator. And so you can see he's got this kind of fairy tale book text. And what you can also see there is that through the animation, the line that is being spoken comes up really strong, but then you still see like the ghost of the past lines. So you've got a bit longer to be able to read the text. And so in the piece, those texts are kind of moving around on the screen, as I said, to try and be as close to the performers as possible. Those captions are being live cued by an operator, by our production manager, and so it's labor intensive because you need somebody who knows the performance. It was also tricky for us at first because we knew that we had to really learn the lines and say them correctly, and say the right lines, because it can be a bit confusing if you hear a line and then you see that it's slightly different on the screen. So at first we found that a little bit difficult because we're used to doing a lot of improvising. But in the end, we really appreciate the need to be very clear, and it just makes it easier for everybody to really understand what we're trying to say. Yeah, I'm going to move quickly onto the audio description. So we also have audio description of the piece, and we've worked with some really good audio describers who they create their own script. So they watch a video of the piece or they come and see the show, and then they create their own script which fits in between the text. Obviously, positioning of where the live audio describer is really important, because they need to be able to see the stage, and be able to say their lines, but they also need to be far away enough that the rest of the audience don't hear them, or that's the idea. So some venues have a full setup for that and the perfect kind of sound booth, and other venues that's a bit more experimental. In some places we've worked, they have this thing called a steno mask. And Nene, if you could just show these pictures, they're not very important, but they made me laugh when I was trying to work on this. So this is a steno mask that's basically got a microphone inside it, and the idea is that it covers all the sound, so no one will hear what you're saying. Let's have the next image, which is another representation. Yeah, so we had one venue where they tried to use this. I wouldn't advise it because the audio describer is obviously waiting for a time that it's quiet. So when we stop talking on stage, then they can get in more information. So it just means that everybody nearby can kind of hear this sound. So I guess in some ways that does give something. The times when two different needs might clash, or might kind of, yeah, the needs of somebody to hear the audio description, that might distract somebody who really needs to have the space quiet. And even sometimes, like when I'm on stage, in our pre-show announcement, we say that people can move and they can make noise and they can do what they need to feel relaxed. But actually, as a performer, that's quite hard. So it's like, because I get distracted. So it's always trying to find a balance of like, trying to find ways that different needs can be met, but knowing that it's not always going to be perfect or accessible for everyone. Yeah. And also the audio describer can sometimes do a touch tour, so for blind and partially sighted people, where they can come and look at the stage, they can feel the textures of some of the props and the costumes, and sometimes they will chat to me and Rosanna to hear what our voice is like, and to meet us. But similarly with the clash of needs, sometimes because this happens right before the performance, I don't feel like I'm able to do that touch tour because I'm trying to get ready for the show. Okay, and one more thing is that we have this pre-show announcement that I mentioned, and that initially came from working with Battersea Arts Centre, which in London, which is trying to be what they call a relaxed venue. So they're trying to think about how the whole experience for an audience member or visitor can be as supportive as possible. And so we record our own announcement at the beginning of the show, which is the first thing that everybody hears as the lights go down. And in that, we say that it's a relaxed performance, that people should feel free to do anything that makes them feel relaxed in the space, that they can move around, they can leave, they can come back. We tell them that the piece is captioned. There might be an audio describer using a funny mask in the audience. We say that there's a quiet space, and we introduce the well-being practitioner. And the idea also that they could have an overwhelming response to the performance. And so we find that this pre-show announcement, even though it's quite like giving lots of information, it kind of gives everybody in the space permission to be themselves. So everyone can just take a minute to check in with themselves and imagine what they might do if they need to leave or to move. We're also making it clear that we know that different people have different needs, and we're creating a space for that. So it's like this small political act, I think, at the top of the show. And I think we definitely had moments of being unsure about having a pre-show announcement. I think we had like ideas of the theatre being this magical, sacred space, and you can't have this extra information. It's just like we want people to be really in the show. But the more we've done it, we realize that it's a really beautiful kind of transition time for people to go from like the outside world into the world of the performance. It gets them used to our voices, it gets them used to the tone of the performance. We also say that people can laugh, which can be quite useful because some people think they're coming to see a show about trans experiences and that maybe it'll be very serious. So now we're really interested in that and trying to think about how we are holding the whole experience. That's me for that bit. Nene, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ivor. So I'm going to talk about some of the kind of practical elements of building or embedding access during touring. And I will speak about this across audience and artist experience. But before I say that, I'm going to say a little fact, but it might embarrass Ivor a little bit, but it's true. But by the end of 2023, The Making of Pinocchio had performed 29 shows for over 4,800 people and toured 8 cities, 5 countries, and 3 continents. I'm saying this because I think it's really important to highlight touring as a vital and important part of our sector and industry. I believe the arts speak to each other and it speaks to its different contexts. And through working internationally, you deepen your understanding of practice, you sharpen your awareness, and that really truly informs who you are as artists and your trajectory. And touring allows for a wider reach of people, audiences, and perhaps that allows for wider impact of learning, community building, or kinship. So this is all kind of things that inform us as we tour. So some of those practical elements that we try to put in as we embed access is alongside our production meeting, a production meeting where you talk about your venue and your tech. We also have our access meeting where we talk about our provisions needed for the company or for the audience. And those two things are planned in conjunction. And we make sure that we're not passively prioritizing one conversation over the other, but both are quite given active space to time to talk about and navigate with our partners. Alongside our technical rider, we also share anyone's in the company's riders as well, access riders, and we share that with the wider team, our partners, and our own company as well. Access riders are documents that are used for disabled artists to ensure that access needs are met when they're working. So they generally cover things from people's preferred preferences or adjustments needed for meetings, events, travel, communication, working styles. We also have a trans awareness rider, which aims to encourage people's knowledge and care regarding using inclusive and thoughtful language, such as pronoun use and etiquette in a sense. And this is specific to trans identifying folk. We share this with our partners, and we ask them to share it with their staff across teams. So that's across their tech teams, their front of house teams. So there is a sense of this kind of groundwork happening in the space before we enter it. And that might also that knowledge might already exist there. We also have, Ivor previously mentioned, we have a wellbeing practitioner. We ask and advocate for our wellbeing practitioner to be there during the performance to offer support to audiences, essentially a listening ear. I know that sometimes wellbeing practitioner is hard sometimes to translate into different contexts, but we describe a wellbeing practitioner to us as someone who's creating a safer space for audiences. So this is a person who's essentially offering an adjustment or a service for audiences during the show. They'll be there to listen, de-escalate, and understand people's experience. And then they offer signposting to resources or other networks. And it feels important for us, for this person to be from that locality that we arrive to and have an awareness of those networks and resources. The wellbeing practitioner job description has been made and informed by previous runs of the show. So previous people who have done the work have helped build that role as well and what it looks like. And in the past, the job description has been translated into German, and partners are welcome to translate it to support that recruitment process. I also think it's really interesting because as a recruitment process for the partners finding a wellbeing practitioner, they get to exercise that muscle a little bit of how to widen their networks, engaging with perhaps maybe communities they otherwise wouldn't engage with, and explore something new. So it's kind of a difference. Oftentimes it's a different or a new way for partners to offer support to their audiences. We also have a quiet hour, which is built into the day for the performances, and that's an hour leading up to the show. I know I was going to talk about this a little bit more, but that is something that like we speak about firsthand in our production meetings, how kind of important it is to hold space for that quiet hour and for the company and their needs. I won't go too much into that. I'll let Ivor talk about that. We also asked for a quiet space for audiences and for Ivor. So if venues or partners or festivals, they don't already have a quiet space in the venue, we ask for the audience quiet space to be wheelchair accessible if possible, to be located within the venue in a quieter area, so not like near the toilets or like near something loud. I mean, I went to the Globe recently and the quiet space was a tent in the foyer by the toilets. And overall, we want it to be a kind of less sensory overload space. And we asked for that quiet space to be available for audiences to use during the performance and for an hour after. We also have a digital version of the performance, which Ivor spoke about, and that's free for partners to share during the run. Audio description is also available. We also asked, when it comes to ticket prices, for partners to prioritize affordable tickets whenever possible. So this can be done in a sliding scale or pay what you can schemes, or discounted tickets for trans identifying folk or people who otherwise would not be able to see the show. So through prioritizing, kind of embedding access as we move and as we tour, we hope that we can be a model that informs and offers insight through our access commitments that kind of hold and represent different people's lived experience and advocate for those needs. It's worth saying, though, of course, it's not perfect and it will never be. And that's important to remember. Access is not a one size fits all, but it's something that is flexy and ongoing and adjustable, and kind of thinking in the terms of accessible to the widest amount of people. I'm going to let Ivor talk a little bit more about some of the stuff around access riders and quiet space and what that kind of means particularly.
Thank you. Just trying to find the mic button. I'm not going to talk loads because I do want to hear people's questions, but thanks for that, Nene. So from an artist perspective, another fun thing, as well as making this new show, was that happened during COVID times was that I realized that I'm autistic and I'm someone with ADHD. And through understanding more about that, I started to, having had a break from making and performing work, I realized that coming back to making and performing work, there would be things that I might find more difficult than I had in the past. So through the process of touring the making of Pinocchio and being supported by Nene and our other producer Nora as part of arts admin, I've been able to kind of come up with my own access rider and understand my needs. And I think the basic part of it is like, if I think about what do I need to be able to do my job well, what do I need to be able to turn up? So being autistic, I think the main thing that happens for me is that there's not so much of a filter for me on sensations that are coming in. So I can be very overwhelmed by a loud space, or I can be very distracted by different things. Or I can get overwhelmed when there's a lot of stress. I think that's something kind of found. And I think that's one of the things with the idea of like relaxed performances is that traditionally putting on a show is not very relaxed. It's like we've got a deadline to meet. There are people coming. Everything's got to work. There's dangerous things coming at you. There's so many people in one space trying to make this thing happen. And so what the process is on tour is trying to take away some of that drama, take away that stress, take away that noise, which just allows me, but also the whole team to do their job better, and for audiences to feel like they're able to be held as well. That it's not stress. This is a crisis. It's like everything can be just a bit calmer, and that's good for a lot of reasons. I can also kind of get very fatigued by all that kind of sensory input, meeting new people, being in a new space. So it's just about knowing what energy I have at different times. So yeah, as Nene said, I have my own personal rest space, which we've called quiet space, but I realized it needs to be called a rest space because I do actually try and have a nap in there. So sometimes the rest space is like just in a very noisy place or a room that doesn't have a ceiling. That's not good. Just to be clear, that's not good. So trying to have my own space, sometimes it's like just a dressing room. That's really important. And what I realize is it's a bit tricky sometimes for me to ask for that myself, because I have like internalized ableism, or it feels like I'm asking for too much, you know, like it's a dressing room with my name on it. It feels like I'm kind of being a diva or something. But I know that if I know where that is, and the producer has made that connection and asked for that, and it's all been covered before I even arrive, then it's really easy for me to just go and use it when I need to, and that's great. What Nene talked about with the quiet hour before we get the show ready, then our production manager Sorsha has this thing called we call it getting on the show train. And it's basically lots of people have this, but it's like a really clear routine that we go through in the couple of hours before we start the show. And during that time we ask for there to be no people from the theatre in there. It's only our team, and there's no kind of extra noise, or it's very clear that like I go and get, well, yeah, all of us go and get changed at the time when the front of house team comes in. So it's just kind of separating out the different parts, so they don't have the situation of like there's lighting people in at the same time as front of house people in at the same time as we're trying to do stuff, because that just gets too distracting. And I really appreciate this, because I just get very distracted by other people being in the space, so it works really well. And yeah, I think that kind of no drama thing kind of covers the whole experience, and as much as possible we try and avoid those things that sometimes happen in the theatre where like everybody wants to look busy, or everybody wants to shout across the space, or everybody like says things are fine but then they bitch about you outside, all that kind of stuff we like are trying to kind of remove, which I think is like a better way of existing in the world in general. Yeah, the drama just happens on stage, okay. And yeah, that's probably about it. I think what I, as an artist who now realizes that I'm disabled and I'm kind of trying to work in these spaces, it's an ongoing journey trying to find where I have agency, where I have power to make a situation work for me. It's not always possible. Sometimes it's just trying to survive and get through it. But I think, as Nene said, as we're touring, this allows us to sort of share our knowledge and our needs, and that can hopefully make bigger changes once we've gone away. So I'm going to stop talking there so that I think we can have a bit of time for questions. Or Nene, was there anything else you wanted to say?
No, I mean, I wrote one little bit that I'm going to say because I was writing. I was trying to think of something, a finisher, because I was like, okay, we kind of trail off a little bit. But I'll do my finisher, guys. So I think it's useful for us to connect these ideas and these things that we hold with intersectionality, transness and queerness with neurodivergence. Like, to queer ourselves is to sit out the binary, similar to how disabled folk are treated within these structures, and also awareness of how our identities can further compound based on racialized background, economical, social upbringing, and other lived experiences. And I think these conditions really like push forward the practical logistics of how we tour and how we sit alongside each other. So that's my finisher.
Right.
I guess now we're open for some questions and answers. So I guess we'll give it back to Alex, our moderator, as well.
If you have a question, then just raise you should see this like the kind of raising hand. Yes, there you go. Raised hand function, and it will number, so it becomes a queue. So you just raise your hand and we'll get to you. So there's one hand raised already. I can try. Anna is first. Anna,
Hello.
your mic is on. Go for it.
Yes, thank you so much for the talk. I have just two little questions actually to just understand a bit more with this quiet space. When you said you would also like to have it open for 1 hour after, is this something like, what would be your preferred space to have that, like within the scenography kind of, to have this connection to the piece, or like more really like an outside area somewhere? That was the first question.
I can answer that. So yeah, so for context, a quiet space is a space that people can kind of remove themselves from the main activity that's happening. So for this context, it would be the theatre and the show. And that quiet space is often a room, maybe with like a couple chairs, a place so someone can sit or lay down. And that would happen. So essentially that would be available at that space. A different room would be available for people and audience members to use during the performance, so they can come and go out of the theatre when needed, and after the performance as well. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. And then I have one more. Sorry, I'm just going for it now. Regarding this well-being practitioner, like, is that something that you communicate to the audience in the pre-talk as well, that there is a person? So it's not just an internal thing for you?
Yeah, so originally how it happened was that in the pre-show announcement, this announcement that Ivor talks about, you hear some of these access provisions that are available for audiences. So a well-being practitioner will be part of that adjustment, and they will have a moment where Ivor and Rosanna will go, there's a well-being practitioner here tonight, and the well-being practitioner will go on stage and wave to the audience. The audience members will be able to go, okay, that's what that person looks like. And oftentimes they'll be quite near to the theatre, but they won't be inside of it. They'll be maybe just outside of the performance, and people can easily find them and go speak to them. Sometimes people are happy to have conversations like in a foyer and have a conversation there. And sometimes people go have conversations in a more private space.
Okay. Yeah. As I imagined, I was just wondering if that person is, when you also said like helping with adjusting, that people feel comfortable, like how active is that person, or is it always just, backup, and then the people, the audience are responsible to go actually to that person? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think lots of times the audience will go find that person.
Okay.
But I think it brings up the point around how you communicate about these provisions, because you would have that information in like on the website, but obviously not everybody will find that or remember it. So that's why it is quite good to have it restated at the beginning of the show, and to have a visual view of, oh, that's what the wellbeing practitioner looks like. But yeah, then the audience has to go and find it. And obviously everybody from the front of house team and the box office, they need to know that that's happening as well. So that as soon as somebody, say if somebody came out of the theatre and they were a bit upset, that the front of house person could go and help them to find the wellbeing practitioner. So it's, everybody needs to know what's going on, and you need to tell people as many times as possible, I think.
Thank you.
Nice, thank you. We've got another question from someone called Christina.
Yep, Christine, that's me. Thank
Christina.
you. That was really generous and informative. I have a question about some of the pre-show, like how you manage that, because I've heard other relaxed performances where maybe you're meeting different groups, accessibility, like maybe people are really sensitive to loud noises or lights or visuals. And so is it about like knowing your show well enough and what could be triggering or what could be an issue, or are you really trying to meet as many needs as possible in this like pre-show where, like you were saying, you let there were people with maybe limited visibility who are invited on stage to touch props and stuff? I guess, how do you meet all those needs, or how do you understand before the show what you can or should be offering?
I can answer that a little bit. Yeah, I think it's there's not, as Nene said, it's not one size fits all. I think it's trying to have the understanding of different, all the different parts. So going through, okay, if I'm somebody who can't see what's happening on stage, what might help me to still be able to experience the performance? There's tricky parts, I think, like with sensitivity to noise and things. What we suggest is that it's really helpful if the venue can supply like ear defenders or something. Obviously there needs to be a bit of understanding from the audience member of what they might find difficult. I mean, when I go to the theatre, I have my own noise cancelling headphones, but if I know that I'm in a relaxed space, then I don't feel embarrassed about using them. So there's the signposting as well, of trying to let people know that we get it in some way. We won't get everything, and yeah, you can't. I guess the same as like the discussion around things like trigger warnings. You can't always know what's going to trigger you emotionally, but we try and imagine it. I think something like sound is difficult because I sometimes have difficulty with the level of sound in the space, and the sound design is kind of really amazing and immersive, but there is always a bit of a conversation of like, if I was coming to watch this, I might find it too loud. So we're always trying to see how to make it as comfortable as possible. I should say that we do usually, like on the website, when people are selling tickets, there might be a link to something that says like, how do I know if this show is for me? And it might have information about there will be loud noises, or it might be something like there will be nudity in this, or there will be a small description of transphobia, to give people more information. And yes, somebody has to look for that a little bit, but we're just trying to have that information there somewhere. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got another question in the chat. Can you see it there, or would you like? Maybe it's good I can read it and then everybody gets to hear it. It says, "Thank you very much. Really informative. Would love to know the percentage of budget inputs realizing those access methods, i.e., is that costly or fair price to have audio description for whole show, etc." I mean, I guess you wouldn't. It's not always you that's actually covering this cost, but you can still talk about it from your own perspectives about like the amount of resources you have to invest in doing this and how you figure out how to prioritize and things like that.
Yeah, that is, yeah. I would say that access sometimes costs more as well. It really varies and changes. I mean, there's been definitely moments where some venues and partners can't afford a wellbeing practitioner for every show, and it will be a very long run, so they won't be able to do that, but maybe they'll commit to doing 2 to 4 shows. So it really does change. I guess also, I think what we're seeing within the sector as well, which might speak to that a little bit, is that people are trying to carve out more pots of money towards access, and that sits in a different budget, right? And it doesn't fall just within the creative artistic part. And I think that kind of change is awareness from the sector that access needs to be prioritized. It really changes the terms of how people show up and who shows up. Is it a fair price to have audio description? I think it does cost. It depends on the cost. That's a question I wouldn't know off the top of my head. But yeah, I have heard, I think what I sometimes is maybe the fear around people going, oh, access costs money, then we shouldn't do it. I think that is a little bit something maybe that we shouldn't move towards as well, because it's part of, it's a reasonable adjustment for many people, and it can change the terms as well, and you can fundraise for it in different ways. And I think people are becoming more aware of that as well.
Have you got something to add on that, Ivor?
Yeah, I would say that something like audio description, I think, is probably something that for some venues just feels like one step too far. But then the question is, well, do you want any blind people to come to your building or not? And so it kind of becomes a question of like, if your venue or your show is offering these things, yes, maybe only one person is going to access it, but then the next time there's a performance on, maybe 3 people come, or it is talking in terms of numbers, it's small, but in terms of politics and vision and ethics and values, it's really important to try and do what you can, I think. But it does cost money. That's true.
It relates to a question that I wanted to ask, which is, it's a bit different, but I think it relates. I wonder, as you put in these different measures that you're practicing within the company, could you say a little bit about how it sort of benefited everyone? Because what we've discovered as a theatre is that the more practices you put in of a relaxed nature, even though they might be with disability access in mind, the benefits reach essentially everyone in the organisation. I just wonder if you could share some reflections on that, because I think it's the same thing you say, like 1 or 2 people might come initially, but it's not just them, it's everybody that's present that's somehow feeding off this kind of thinking. Could you share some thoughts on that?
You go, Ivor.
No, you go.
Okay, I think you kind of said it, Alex. Like, it does a lot of these kind of things in mind around access and adjustments that people are needed, benefits people on very different ways in their life. Like, it benefits parents, relaxed performance can benefit people with childcare. It can benefit very different kind of identities or interlocking things that people experience around time, around where they need to be, all those different things. I also think it really informs creatively. It's a shift, right, within our industry around how we think about ourselves, around how we think about our communities. A lot of the arts is pinned up by the theatre being very inaccessible and only speaking to a very particular community. But now we're learning more that actually audiences come from many different places and have many different needs, and that creatively informs our artistic community as well. And that's the shift in how what programmers want to see. We're doing better in not just including, but also thinking broader sense of creatively what access is and who it benefits as well. And I think it's also stepping away from a structure that is like informed by capitalism as well. And how does that not benefit most communities?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's also, maybe from coming out of the pandemic, not that we're completely out of it, but there was a lot of talk around care and people's needs, and like even just the idea that people have needs that maybe aren't being met by the world that we live in. I think there's a chance for people to realize what some of their needs are as well. I mean, I'd be really excited if somebody comes to the show and realizes that actually being able to read captions really helps them to process much more easily. Like, that's something I've found, is that now I'll watch TV with subtitles on, and I'm like, oh, this is much much better. Or any number of these kind of access things that then help each other. So I think, yeah, it has this bigger knock-on effect for a lot of people. Yeah.
We don't have any more raised hands. There's still an opportunity if you want to raise your hand to ask a question. Here we go. Yeah. Dean, I think it is.
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Right. I wanted to ask, has there been any sort of how do you go? What can you call it? Institutional challenges or hurdles that you've, like, I don't know how else to word it, like there's been any sort of policies or systematic barriers that doesn't fully allow you to express yourself creatively while also being as accessible as possible for the majority of the audience.
I think in general, venues have maybe been very responsive and interested in the measures we want to put in place. Sometimes within a theatre building, there are very different departments. So it might be that the people in an office somewhere are very excited about the things we're talking about, but maybe the people in the technical team haven't been really told about that. And so there might be a bit of a mismatch, I think. And so it's taken a while to make that work. Sometimes that's been a bit tricky. I think I'm remembering, like, we were in Brisbane, and in a very nice, lovely, big art centre. And usually, as part of what we're asking for obviously accessible toilets that disabled people can use, but we're also asking for non-gendered toilets, so that everyone can pee happily. And what happened, somehow in Brisbane, that hadn't got across, so there was only one toilet that was both the only non-gendered toilet was the accessible toilet. So it meant that what was kind of amazing but not good for people's bladders, was that there was a big queue basically of all these non-binary teenagers who were coming, and then people in wheelchairs sort of all waiting for the one toilet. So little things like that, where there's yeah, that just hasn't been thought of within the kind of system of what a building or a venue might be. And usually there is this thing of the everybody is vocally supportive of the ideas, but when you have the practical, when you try and put it into practice, there might be something that's been missed. So I think we sometimes find that, or a team that believes, oh, we're really good, we do everything right, so there's no problems here. But then when you actually look at it, there is a bit of a problem or a misunderstanding. So it's definitely always a learning journey, I think, with whoever we're working with.
Yeah, I would say I don't think we've come across like institutional policies that speak to like not having disabled neurodivergent people in the building, and maybe in like complicit or like subversive ways, but not like in kind of standardized ways. But I think one of the barriers that it's feeling sometimes is that cultural lacking of understanding around what access means and who needs it, and that kind of sometimes having that kind of feeling that like our audiences don't need this and our audiences won't use it. And then it's always quite interesting actually when an audience member does use it and a wellbeing practitioner does get spoken to, or a quiet space is used. I think that really does shift for people, so it puts it on our side a little bit to fight for that adjustment or that provision, so that expectation that then in practice is a little bit questioned as well.
Could you say something about the idea of calling in? Because in the rider, you describe calling in like as a kind of not counter, but as a, let's say, detour from calling out. Could you like just share that? Because I think it's a really interesting proposition.
Yeah, so I mean, calling in has kind of been that counter away from that calling out culture, and it's not about I'm someone who I really respect. Emma Josephine Budge talks about these kind of calling in moments as acts of love, acts of compassion, of when you bring people within your community, within your peer group, in to learn more, and that in itself as a gesture is one of love and not one of confrontation or trying to push people out, but actually one of trying to do better, bridge the gap and learn together. And that is about building and creating more a sense of awareness and kinship. Is that kind of what you mean, Alex?
Yeah, but also just because I'm not sure everyone, maybe everybody already knows about what calling in is, but it's in the rider as a proposition, because when you're describing now that you will come to institutions that are saying to you, we want to do a good job and we want to be as inclusive and as accessible as possible, but these places are full of blind spots. So how do you navigate good intention versus not perfect execution? And you have this proposition in the rider of calling in, and it'd be cool if you could unpack what that is, just so that everyone gets to hear it.
Yeah, so like I guess the counter calling out, there was a time where I guess a lot of people felt a sense of, if you questioned people's intentions or questioned people's gestures or activity as this is something that goes against, feels racist, feels transphobic, feels queerphobic, people would feel a sense of exclusionary, like, what does that mean for me? And maybe questions people's sense of self within that. And calling in is kind of the opposite. Actually, this is a dialogue, it's an invitation to a conversation for all of us to do better. And what can we learn from each other? So it's kind of shifting away from blame and moving towards action in a sense. Yeah. Do you want to add anything, Ivor?
I think we were aware as well of a kind of sense of calling in, and in terms of discussing ideas around transgender experiences as well, because we know that with particularly in the UK, there's a lot of transphobia that says, oh, you can't talk to trans people, or there's this trans agenda, and if you try and understand trans stuff, you're just going to be called transphobic. So we specifically made this piece to be as generous and kind of open as possible, and that you could come being not sure about what the issues might be for a trans person. And so we're trying to bring people on a journey with us around the trans stuff, and then we're trying to bring people on a journey with us around the disability access as well. And yeah, I think there's also, I think with access there can be a worry that you're not going to get it right, or that you're going to offend some group, or you're going to miss something out. And I guess it's like for all of us to try and be brave, and making some gesture is usually better than no gesture. I think we all know situations where a gesture maybe has gone wrong, but we need to kind of think that there's plenty of people around now who can help us with that, and who can consult on it, who can share lived experiences, and can, yeah, there's plenty of resources out there as well. Yeah.
Nice, thank you. I think we should make this the last question, but we have got a question in the chat. I'll just read it out. Is there any public shared instructions or compiled directions / rider for independent projects to promote the accessible measures? So I guess this is just like, could you direct us towards any great resources? I see Nene's immediately flying in with a link there, so people can copy that. Yeah, anything you want to sort of pathway find us towards?
Pow, pow, pow. That was fast. They're very fast. Yeah, I think we have like our own access rider, but that's been fed in by from different resources from other people. But yeah, that looks like a good resource.
Super. I think we should wrap it up there. So thanks so much. It was really fantastic to listen, and great to see lots of people joining. Oh, we've got Jana wanting to add something. Shall we?
No.
Let's hear from you.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing so openly, and it was really a lot to take in and a lot to learn for me. So thank you so much.
Hey, thank you too. So thanks. I just want to say also thank you to everyone behind the scenes, because on the face of it, it is basically a big Teams meeting, but actually a lot of preparation and work went into just making it possible for us all to be here today. So just to acknowledge that and say thank you. And thank you to Nene and Iva for all of your preparation. It's really clear that you came with a lot and really prepared well, and I think it's really fantastic what you brought today. We're going to be offering more of these, so hopefully we'll see everyone joining next ones, and those that can come to Trondheim, or if you can't come to Trondheim, try and catch the Making of Pinocchio in the other places that it will be going. So yeah, thank you. And also thank you to the sign interpreters for signing everything. Yeah, thanks a lot.